I talk a lot about the promises we make to ourselves, and which I think are really important. I've made many, I've broken many. I think that if you have some core promises, like really big promises that you've made to yourself, and you don't break them, that if you actually hold on to them with two hands, you build self-esteem. If you make promises to yourself that actually mean something. I'm not talking about, silly promises you make throughout the day, but really important, meaningful promises because of what you've been through or where you're at. If you break that promise, you are puncturing your self-esteem balloon, if that makes sense. So this is one promise that I think if you hold on to, it will change your life. I know it did for me. And the promise is this: I will no longer react. Instead, I will respond. Most of my life, I've been a walking reaction. I have gone into spaces and hijacked the energy or the positivity by being negative. I've taken hostages by putting my shit on other people. I've been very irresponsible about impacting other people in a way that they didn't ask for, right? So for example, when I was miserable, when I was unhappy, when I was pessimistic and confused and angry, instead of me working on that, instead of me taking responsibility for that, depending on who I was loving at the time, and also, of course, friends, family, all that, I would unload onto them, right? I would bring them down with me, which is a horrible habit. And also, it's going to make you very lonely, because who wants to hang out with someone like that, right? But what it does is, it doesn't give you the opportunity to grow, right? It doesn't give you the opportunity to expand. So let me explain this part. When you actually respond, which is an ability, right? It's not something that we are born with, right? We're born with reactions, right? Our panic, our fight or flight, that's a reaction. Our knee jerk is a reaction, usually from our upbringing, from our wiring, our conditioning, right? Throwing chairs is a reaction. The response is not. The response requires learning. It requires patience. It requires sometimes metacognition, right? It requires a breaking of a pattern. And so if you actually respond to something instead of react, now there's something new, right? Now you have an opportunity to be someone different. And it's all of these opportunities, because our road forks daily where we can respond instead of react, that will guarantee change in some way, right? There's no way that if you promise yourself that you will start responding instead of reacting, there's no way that that's not going to change your life, because if you do that, you're going to make different decisions. Me being a walking reaction for most of my life, I didn't put that emotional speed bump. I didn't think about things. I just vomited, And so instead of making choices that are promoting my growth, I cemented beliefs and patterns that stunted my growth. Does that make sense? And so if you are just reacting, if you're allowing yourself to react, whether it's to a person, to a situation, and I know that it's hard to respond. It really is. I'm 47 and I struggle with it daily, and I'm going to tell you a quick story real quick. But when you just live your life on default, you're powerless. You're allowing the external, whether it is an event or a person or a conversation or whatever, the external now has power over you because you're reacting to it, if that makes sense. You take power back by responding to it. You take power back by taking in the event or person or whatever is happening, digesting it, and then now you have a choice, right? How do you want to choose to respond to this? And that's where the empowerment is. The other day, I was coming home from the grocery store, and yes, I was on my phone. I wasn't driving fast. I was actually driving too slow because I was on my phone. But I was kind of stopped. I was making a left, but I was, checking something, and I'm totally guilty of that. And the guy behind me lays on his horn, and I turn around, and it's this giant raised truck. And I don't want to stereotype, because in high school I had a raised truck, and it wasn't even a real 4x4. It was a 2x4 Toyota truck that I lifted, put on the big tires to be cool, and Stussy sticker on the back. Anyway, so this guy had this big monster truck, and he was laying on his horn, two giant American flags coming out of his bed, and he started cussing me out. And then so he passes me, and then he pulls over, and it's like he's waiting for me to come, right? And at this point, my reaction is like, oh, this guy wants to fight, and I'm getting angry, right? I'm like, what the fuck you want, over what? Because I slowed down. What's amazing is how we turn into different people in our cars, right? When we're in our cars, you could be like the kindest person, but in your car, you could be like a fucking ass, like unrecognizable, right? Anyway, so I felt the initial knee jerk of driving toward him. He would have probably gotten out of his car, I don't know, and then that would have set something off in me, and who knows what would have happened. But I decided to respond, and my response was, I'm going to turn around. I'm going to make a U-turn and let him cool off. And I noticed that I did that, and I still felt very angry. I still felt the like I need to go show him, or who the fuck does he think he is, like all of that. And then I started playing forward his story. I actually mentally, with my imagination, followed him home. And what I imagined was, what is his life like? Why is he so angry? Because I get frustrated too if someone's on their phone in their car. But I wouldn't pull over, yell, racial things and honk my horn and want to fight the person. I may honk and I would swerve around and maybe, under my breath, say a few words. But this person, what he did was so extreme. It made me curious what his home life was like. And so I imagined what his home life was like. I followed him home, and I kind of played out what his story would be like for someone to be that angry. And I was able to kind of feel sad for him, right? Whether that imagination is true or not doesn't matter. What matters is I did what I had to do to respond, to let go, to not be angry anymore, to be empathetic, right? And also to own that I shouldn't have been on my phone while I was driving. So there was that piece too. And when I started to humanize the person, he was no longer a monster. He was just someone who had anger issues. And I used to have anger issues, so I could relate to that person. Anyway, I shared the story because it was an opportunity for me to either react or respond, right? The reaction would be to go meet him where he was at and possibly get into a fight or whatever. And the response, and by the way, I'm not a fighter. It's not something that I do normally. My last fight was like, in 7th grade. So my response was to turn the car around, right? It's one decision, it's one choice, and the leverage that I have, or the motivation I have to do that is the promise I made to myself that I would do everything I can to respond instead of react. Using that example, where in your life do you need to start responding instead of reacting? Where in your life today are you a walking reaction? In your relationship, with your friendships, at work, I don't know. But if you make this promise to yourself that you will start to respond instead of react, there will be growth there. There is now evolution. There is now a better version of you. Thank you for listening. Be well and respond instead of react.